Audi E-Tron.
What? Why are we looking at an Audi E-Tron?
Well, I mean, for me, I've always liked the Audi brand. I mean, growing up, we had Volkswagens, and I always viewed Audi as essentially the more luxurious VW, which I guess essentially that's kind of how these brands are set up. So that kind of makes sense. And I did consider Audi in the past when I was going through the evaluation of trying to get a Golf R. And because of the issues I was having with the Volkswagen dealers, and before I made the decision to buy the Focus ST, I did consider just getting essentially the Audi version of the Golf R. Yes, it's a sedan versus a hot hatch, but it had the exact same engine, so it would have very similar performance. So I did consider that. Ultimately, I didn't go that route, but I did consider it. So, for me, it just seemed natural, and I have seen other videos on the Audi e-tron. So I thought, it's right there. Let's take advantage of it, and let's check it out. So what were your impressions walking into the dealership?
Okay, so it was lovely. It was a very nice dealership. We were offered bottled water. Did you want still or sparkling?
Yeah, there's a LaCroix over here.
Yes,
yeah.
I did get a so that was nice.
Well, what did we see when we first went in the door?
And there's the merchandise area in the back, but their showcase vehicle was
the Audi e-tron RS GT. Beautiful red. Oh my god, it was a thing to behold.
I didn't know if I was going to get Justin out of there.
Yeah, luckily for everyone, the car was locked.
It was locked and it was sold.
Exactly, that's why it was locked. Because I turned the page and I asked him, like, do I need to sit in that, or should I sit in that? Because we know what happened the last time I sat in a car. And luckily for everyone, at least on our side, because then we looked at the sticker, the invoice slip and all that, and I'm like, oh yeah, we'd have to get a mortgage done for this.
Right.
But wow, it was a beautiful showpiece for sure.
Right.
Really sets the stage. And then we also noticed that the dealer was, because it was very nice, and we said it reminded us of another dealership that we remember going into when we lived in downtown LA, a different manufacturer, and the only difference was Audi actually cared that we were there and attended to us, whereas the other dealership in downtown LA ignored us the entire time. So we ended up walking out and leaving. So that was very refreshing.
Yes.
It was very refreshing. So.
Oh, and everybody there was so nice.
They were, and the salesperson, what was his name? Noe. Was fantastic. Shout out to Noe. And so we ended up test driving one of their used, pre-owned 2019 e-trons, because they didn't have any of the new 21 21s in stock. So.
And I do have pictures. We'll make sure that we include those in
Absolutely.
Here.
The only downside, I guess, from the one we drove, it was the kind of the normal crossover SUV styling, and it wasn't the Sportback version. They drive the same and all that kind of stuff, but we saw a beige, I don't know the variation of beige that they had, but they had a beige version of the Sportback plugged into the charges, and oh my god, it looked so sharp.
Yes.
It really had great lines. So, Audi, they have some great designers over there. So, let's get into the test drive. Now, Paige and our daughter rode in the back, and then what were your impressions from the back seat?
Well, I know when we first sat down, it was just like, oh my gosh, the floor is so far down. It was really nice because it just felt like I don't even know if I can describe it well enough, but it just seemed like it was a flat floor, and it was just very, very comfortable. And they had on the console, on the back part of the console, there were the charging plugs, and it also had where you could turn on your heated seats and you could control the temperature and the fan speeds. There were fans at the lower level, and there were also fans on the door sides. Oh, nice. So they would hit your face, which was really nice. There were like window screens in the back to block out the sun, so we didn't have to be beaten down by the hot Texas sun. And we learned how to pull down the center console so I could put my La Croix in there, and we'd get the cup holder out, and there was a place to put our phones to sit back there, and it was beautiful. It was so nice, leather interior, really comfortable.
The interior trim was. They to me, like, Audi nailed it, right? I mean, it stuck the landing, whatever euphemism you want to use, inserted here. It was just fantastic all around. The quality was really, really premium from door to door. It was really nice, and even including the next thing that I liked about the interior, not to take over the conversation, was the panoramic sunroof, or panoramic moonroof is probably what they call it.
Right, and it did have the split, so it opened, which made me think of maybe what the Aria is gonna do.
Maybe, yeah. So because we kind of saw that from our distance,
and that was nice. But it did have a cover, so you could close it all the way if you didn't want the sun coming in or want any kind of light coming into the car, and it just really kind of was nice.
Yeah, it was a really, really good option. The next thing that I liked, I guess overall, one, it had the cockpit feel, which I'm looking for. Which a lot of the EV vehicles have, but my current RS does not. But it did go along with kind of that Euro interior styling that we gravitate towards. So it was just a great interior design, including the dual screens. It wasn't forcing a complete bland interior with one large screen. They did a great job. They even had the infrared heads-up display, which I didn't notice until we were almost done the test drive, because the distance that it had projected, I just didn't notice until then. So I don't know if it was because maybe I wasn't paying attention to where I was going.
I think you were so busy talking about the car and everything, and that you were just at that point driving it because you were so comfortable.
Yeah, well, it was right. Really second nature. It felt totally comfortable in it, and I mean the Noe, sorry. He was knowledgeable, fantastic. He did a great job at explaining the features and things like that. So it just made it very easy. So kudos to him for making the test drive go really smooth and the entire experience go really smooth. The Audi software itself seemed to be just as good as anybody else's. It was really well done. They have all the latest and greatest features, especially from the display that sits in front of the driver, as far as mixing the more traditional controls like speed and whatever with the maps of where you're going and things like that.
Oh, and you could make the map larger if you were wanting to have that at the front, or you could make it smaller and have the speedometer and everything on the other side.
Yeah, it was really good. Very well done, which is great because for a vehicle that is you typically can have more than one driver and everyone has their preferences. I think that's great to have that type of flexibility. That way, if I prefer something, my preference isn't forced on page, or vice versa, or especially vice versa. The one downside, and it's not a huge downside because we're encountering this with other cars, is it doesn't support wireless Android Auto or Apple CarPlay. We did find out that the 2021 versions do support wireless CarPlay. But they don't support wireless Android Auto, which is again odd. So, but I'm gonna have that as a separate video because I'm gonna do some more research into Android Auto from a wired wireless perspective and do a video on that. So I'll leave my comments there. The other thing that I really enjoyed is when the test drive was done, and we were waiting for Noe to get his business card. The manager came out. And he was very personable. He talked to us, thanked us personally for coming and checking out the car, and was giving us a heads up from a timing perspective that, hey, they do have a couple in the queue that if we end up making the purchase and customize it to our liking, there's still time to get that locked in and included in their next batch of deliveries. Right. So I thought it was kind of good to know from a knowledge perspective, because that does help out potentially the decision maker process. Maybe not necessarily for us today, but I think for people in general, it's always good to know that, because I think because of the chip shortages, people are concerned about the delivery times.
Right.
Because if they're not patient, then that's going to limit their options. So it's always good to give them as much information as possible so they can make the best decision for them that's possible. So, the car handled great, being all-wheel drive. It certainly met my expectations, if not exceeded. It handled really well. It wasn't the fastest accelerating
Right.
EV out there, but that's not its purpose. It was probably in a similar, I mean, a little bit slower than the Ioniq 5s and the Kia EV6s, but I don't know if we would even notice it at the end of the day, because it was only a fraction of a second, 0.5 seconds or something to that effect. So I don't really think that that's sort of any negative towards Audi or anything like that. I guess really the only big challenge when considering the e-tron is still comes down to a GT type performance EV versus a regular EV, for the lack of a better term. And we've already chose one regular EV route with the Kia EV6 from a performance perspective. So if we were going to do two, this would certainly be very high on the list, top 3, if not top 2. It is really that good. The other thing to consider is trying to understand internally as to where do we value the quality of these features, right? Because a lot of these EVs, a lot of these cars in general, they're going to have similar features.
Oh yeah.
Even if they have premium interior and whatnot,
Right.
It really comes down to what's the difference in the implementation, especially from the interior. That's probably one of the ones that are the most obvious to compare, right? What's the Audi premium / luxurious interior? How does it compare to like the Mach-E or the Ioniq 5, or even the Kia to some extent, right? How do they compare, and how do you value that, and what is that number that you would assign to that? I think that's one of the things. From a safety perspective, Audi, has everything covered, and a lot of EVs have a lot of similar features. Again, it comes down to where it stands on your list of priorities. I mean, we're all concerned with safety, of course, but the reality is safety does come at a price. And then there's other things like warranties and things like that. So for us, the Audi is just fantastic. The biggest challenge I think for us would be is, sorry, the
price tag.
The price tag.
Yeah.
But it's to be expected, right? It's not only the higher brand. And to me, I'm trying not to categorize it like the brand itself it costs that much. I think there's that value proposition in Audi.
And the status that comes with that comes with driving an Audi.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. Yeah,
and it is a status symbol.
It is definitely a part for me partially, but I mean we're trying to be pragmatic in this process, and I think ultimately, if I end up deciding to go the Audi route, it would be because I just love the vehicle itself, and I think for me the Audi status would be secondary, because I think Audi has done a great job with this vehicle. So kudos to Audi. I think the biggest challenge would is from a range perspective, because the Audis have lesser range than the competition. I think that Audi is rated at 218 or 219.
Oh yeah.
Versus I think the EV6 that we're getting, the first edition, is at 256 range,
right.
Which we know will get us a long way for this trip, for example, where the Audi, it would get us to the halfway point, so I think we'll be okay there even for this trip. But it does, lessen the range anxiety, but it still may, on longer trips, may add a little bit of range anxiety, because 40 miles potentially is a significant difference on a longer trip, because that's additional stops that if there's going to be long stretches and uphill driving or whatever the case, that may become an issue. But again, we'll talk about that in another video to go through our kind of driving lifestyle, because I don't want to overinflate this range thing when it's probably isn't an issue.
I think one of the things that really stood out to me when we were looking at the car, after we had ridden in it, I got out and I was walking around it and I thought, those tires are huge. Yeah. And they just seem so much bigger than the tires in the other vehicles. And that's because they were 21 inch. They were 20
inch.
Oh, I thought
these ones were 20. You can upgrade to 21.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
But they have that look because the tire itself is a more sleek, thinner tire, and which also brings up to what did we find in the trunk? a real
Oh, that's right. They
spare
do.
tire,
They do have a spare
which
tire.
caught us by surprise because all the other EVs, you just have the pump
Right.
that spit, shoots in the goo and you're done. So,
And it does have a bigger frunk.
it has a bigger frunk. Yeah, for some reason, we just didn't think it even had a frunk, but it did, and it had some other tire things in there.
I think because frunks weren't really talked about that much until really this last year when the Mach-E started coming out.
Well, the Tesla was known for the frunk, but a lot of people, the frunks wasn't part of the conversation, as you said, right? So, and I think because of the Mach-E, the way they have the divider in it, and they have the drain, which people are digging. I think frunks are becoming more central to the conversation because people are looking at the vehicles holistically, looking at interior space as well as other usable space for other things. So it was a nice, pleasant surprise that it was in there. Not the biggest, of course, but it was nice.
And then I think the other thing that really stood out to you was the charging, or the type of charging.
Yeah, being that it's capable of the 350 kilowatt charging, I think is really forward. It's good that it's forward thinking, because that's one of the things that we're trying to be cognizant of. Is yes, we understand the limitations of the current infrastructure for charging, being typically 125 to 150 is the kind of peak, the non-Tesla peak. So having something that is really built towards the future is enticing. That's kind of a nice added benefit, and that's something that we do take into advantage, and we did take into account when we decided to pull the trigger on the EV6 First Edition.
Yeah.
Right? And which is why we're even considering the Ioniq 5, is because it has that charging option. So yeah, I think for me, that covers. And
I think so. I think that's
thumbs up. I mean, we're certainly going to have a few follow-up questions for Audi, and we'll be getting those out over the coming days. Mainly trying to get a feel for what are the differences between a 2019 version versus 2021, especially because if there are significant deals to be had on a 2019 and is not different in any significant way compared to a 2021, I think that makes it even more of a viable option for people. Right? Because why not? It would make no sense not. It would really be a mistake not to seriously consider an Audi E-Tron for that very reason alone.
Right.
So yeah, I think that covers this episode. Again, we'll have future episodes covering the Mach-E test drive, as well as one around trip planning, as well as many others coming down the pipe. But for now,
thank you for being EVenturous with us.
Click like if you liked it. Please hit subscribe. Click that notification bell, and we will see you down the road. Take care.